A woman's right to choose is under assault in this country. Lawmakers in Alabama, they just passed a bill that bans nearly all abortions. Republican Governor Kay May signed it into law just a day later. It does not include exemptions for rape or incest. The only exemption it does have is for cases where the mother's life is at risk. And doctors who perform the procedures, they could face life in prison. Now, the lawmaker who sponsored the bill said the intention it is to get this thing all the way up to the Supreme Court to challenge Roe v. Wade. Take a listen for yourself.
The bill is meant to address Roe v. Wade and the issue that decision was made on, which was, is the baby in the womb a person? I believe that the baby in the womb is a person.
Now, just a few days later, lawmakers in Missouri, they passed their own abortion bill. It also bans a procedure, this time at 8 weeks, a time when many women don't even know that they're pregnant. It also does not provide exemptions for rape or incest. And just this year, 4 other states passed so-called heartbeat bills. These bills ban abortions after a heartbeat is detected, which could be as early as 6 weeks. And in 10 other states, heartbeat bills, they've been proposed by lawmakers just this year alone. And joining me now to discuss, the Very Reverend Catherine Ragsdale, the interim president of the National Abortion Federation. Reverend, thank you for a few minutes. I appreciate it.
Happy to do it.
You know, I've spoken to a lot of both Supreme Court followers to try and read the tea leaves, a lot of legal experts, but what I haven't really heard, and I'd like you to help, is talk about the impact for the people on the ground. I know you deal with both clinics, but also put a human face, if you can. To me, you know, whether it's 8 weeks or whatever else, I know a lot of women don't even know they're pregnant at that point. And I got to imagine what they're hearing and seeing in Alabama, Missouri, and the other states I mentioned, there must be a chilling impact.
Yes, you're absolutely right. At 8 weeks, as you said, people often don't know they're pregnant yet. The other piece that hand in hand with that is the headlines that follow upon the passage and the attempts to pass this legislation often convinces women that these laws and regulations have taken place immediately. So we're already seeing a spike in the number of calls we receive from women in a panic that abortion is not going to be available to them starting now, when in fact none of these laws have taken effect. We're counting on most of them to be enjoined. As you have noted, the goal here is to get it to the Supreme Court and try to overturn Roe. But even shy of doing that, as you have pointed out, women right now fear that abortion is not available to them. They're panicked, they're desperate, looking for medical care and afraid that they're not going to be able to access it. And also, even apart from turning Roe around, the regulations have already been limiting people's access. So it's just an extraordinarily awful situation that women are being forced into.
After that vote in Alabama, there was and is a movement for other women to share their stories. I will just tell you, some of them I found very moving, where they talked about where they were in life when they made that choice. And they encourage other women to speak up as well. Do you think humanizing and people telling personal stories, the argument is, you know, people who've had this procedure, they've just kept it a private matter, which is obviously their right. Do you believe more people are going to come forward from walks of life that might surprise some of these lawmakers? Because when you look at the polling, by 2 to 1, the general public wants to keep the procedure legal.
Right. And every one of these lawmakers has people whom they know and love, people in their families who have had abortions. They just don't know it. And the anti-choice extremists have done such a regrettably excellent job of sensationalizing ridiculous stories and circumstances that it's blinded people to what the real issues are and what the real lives of the real people facing these questions are. So yes, I think people telling their stories.
Well, no, what I wanted to do, Reverend, is if you could, it's not just some fringe element. The president himself went out and told people that doctors were coming, taking the children, the brand newborns, and deciding to kill them. None of this remotely in the area code of the truth. So it's not just a fringe element. You even have the president saying this, and I'm curious, do you think that's what stoked this? Or is it just court makeup where they figure now is the time to take the opportunity?
I think it's both. I think it's both of those things. And I've been in this movement for 35 years. I have watched incendiary rhetoric, demonization. I've watched that up and down over those 35 years. I've watched violence against providers increase with the rhetoric and decrease as things cool down. But you've nailed it. What's different about this is that rhetoric, the lies, the blatant, manipulative, unconscionable lies used to come from the extremists, and now they're coming from the State of the Union, from the halls of Congress, from state legislatures, from the president. That is an extraordinary new moment in this movement. Couple that with the stacking of the Supreme Court, and yes, all those elements come together to create a particularly virulent moment against women's rights.
I'm curious because obviously you're watching this very closely. I've heard two schools of thought. One is, and even the president tried to step back from some of Alabama, meaning the limited exceptions where rape and incest would even be considered exceptions here. I mean, I don't know people who think this way, but anyway, to that end, that the far pro-life movements definitely overplayed their hand, and it's going to make it easy for the court to either strike it down or not even take the case up at all. Others say, well, no. Even if they strike down the most extreme versions, these fetal heartbeat bills, impractical in practice and everything else, they're going to look more sober in comparison, and somehow that will become the norm. When you see these things play out over all these various states in different versions, what is your 10,000-foot view?
Well, I think you're right. And you see, for example, the Missouri bill, which is crafted to have a variety of levels of points where the abortion becomes illegal, in the hopes that the Supreme Court will, if they reject the most extreme, will settle for something a little less extreme, but that still overturns the basic constitutional protections and human rights and dignity of women. Yeah, I think it's a strategic effort to move the center further and further to the right by moving the extreme end.
And I'll only make one editorial point on this one, which is some of the very folks who are screaming from the mountaintop about to not have any exceptions here, to let a woman have a right to have any control of her own body, are the same people who are eviscerating the safety net here that would take care of often these indigent and single mothers, etc. So, when they invoke the God in this aspect, as a member of the laity myself, I think it's an inconsistent message, but I'll do the talking, Reverend, on that last one. I appreciate a few minutes with you. Thank you so much.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for following this story.
All right, everybody, when we come back, there was a political element to that, but we're going to take a closer look at some of the numbers, where the American public stands here on a lot of key issues, but also the 2020 race. We'll tell you what those numbers say.